My name is Clara Vance, and for 3 years, I have been the ghost wife of Captain Julian Thorne. The house on the military base was less a home and more a beautifully appointed waiting room. I was its sole, permanent occupant, while Julian, my husband, was a fleeting visitor. I could count his appearances each month on one hand, the intervals between them a lesson in stillness and hope. Each time he crossed the threshold, he brought the chill of the outside with him, a sharp, clean scent of pine and frost that clung to his uniform. It was a scent as rigid and unyielding as the man himself, and yet I was hopelessly, foolishly drawn to it. I mistook its familiarity for a promise, its persistence for a bond. It took a woman named Isabel Rossi to shatter that illusion. She stood on my doorstep, a vision of effortless grace, the living embodiment of everything I was not. And with her she carried that same sharp scent of pine. It wasn't Julian's unique essence. It was simply the soap his beloved preferred. He stood behind her, a spotless statue in his officer's uniform, his face a mask of detached politeness. It was the same look he gave to junior officers and visiting dignitaries. I realized with a sickening lurch that to him that's all I was. Clara. Isabel's voice was a soft, melodic thing designed to soothe even as it delivered a killing blow. Julian asked me to come and collect his things. He said he won't be needing this place anymore. The words hung in the air, sharp and final. He wouldn't even do me the courtesy of saying it himself. My hand fluttered involuntarily to my stomach, still flat, where our 2-month secret lay nestled. A tiny, burgeoning life that only I knew about. In that moment, with Isabel's pitying gaze and Julian's cold silence, my decision crystallized. Well, Julian Thorne, I thought, my heart turning to iron in my chest. Now that your precious Isabel has returned, I, Clara Vance, will not be the woman who clings to a man who sees her as furniture. I forced my voice to be steady, a calm lake over a turbulent depth. You can have the house. But this, I pressed my hand harder against my stomach. This heart that was wrongly given and the child growing inside me, I'll be taking both with me. Isabel's smile was a delicate knife. She glided into my bedroom as if she owned it, which I supposed she soon would. She opened the wardrobe without hesitation, her fingers brushing past my dresses to find his. She pulled out a simple white dress shirt, the one I'd washed and ironed countless times. The collar and cuffs were worn soft, a testament to its age and his attachment. Oh, and that, I added, my voice dripping with a sweetness I didn't feel. The white shirt he loves so much. Let me take that too. A flicker of confusion crossed her face, but she shrugged, folding it neatly. He's always been sentimental about this one. His mother hand-sewed it for him when he left for the academy. After she died, well, you know how he is. I did know. Or I thought I did. I had believed his care for that shirt, the way he'd quietly let me mend its invisible seams, was his stoic way of acknowledging our 3 years together. Silent thank you. A shared, quiet understanding. The truth was so much simpler and so much more cruel. He cherished it only because of another woman's mother. Our marriage was an arrangement. He was a rising star and I was a small-town girl with a respectable but unremarkable name. For 3 years I had tried. I learned to manage a household, to navigate the intricate social web of the military wives, to be the picture of gentle, supportive grace during his brief visits. The other wives would sometimes look at me with pity. They called me the living widow. They whispered that Julian Thorne had always carried a torch for a beautiful, ethereal woman from his past, and that marrying me was just him checking a box on his life's to-do list. I refused to believe them. I thought my constant warmth could eventually thaw his frozen heart. Until today. Today, Isabel Rossi, his white moonlight, had been transferred to our base. And in one swift, elegant motion she had reduced my 3 years of hope to dust. She walked out of my house, Julian's bundle in her arms, a victorious queen. The moment the door clicked shut, the strength left my body. I slid to the floor, my back against the wall, and slowly opened my clenched fist. Crumpled inside was a lab report, the paper stamped with a red date and the words that now felt like a sentence. 8 weeks. Those numbers burned into my soul. I had loved Julian Thorne for 3 years, with a devotion that now felt idiotic. It was time to wake up. I walked into the bedroom, the room that still smelled faintly of him, and pulled my small leather suitcase from under the bed. My life here amounted to so little. A few changes of clothes, a pair of tarnished silver bangles that were my mother's only legacy. From the deepest drawer of my nightstand I retrieved a metal tin. Inside was $327, saved coin by coin over the years, along with a few precious ration tickets. My escape fund. I took out 2 sheets of paper. The first was a divorce application. On it I wrote a single stark line. I, Clara Vance, voluntarily agree to this divorce. From now on we go our separate ways. The second was a letter. I stared at the blank page for a long time, 1,000 angry, heartbroken words fighting in my mind. In the end I wrote only this. Isabel Rossi already took your things. I threw the rest away. Wishing you all the best. I didn't sign my name. I simply wrote, thinking of you. It was the final bitter twist of the knife, an echo of the quiet longing he had never reciprocated. I took one last look around the house where I had imagined so many futures. Family dinners, children's laughter, a life that grew warmer with time. Now it was just a shell. I placed my hand on my stomach. Don't be afraid, little one, I whispered into the silence. Mommy is taking you away from here. We're going to start a new life, just the 2 of us. The night was as dark and deep as my resolve. Carrying my suitcase I walked out of the military compound and didn't look back. Goodbye, Julian Thorne. The train station was a cavern of echoing noises and shifting shadows. I bought a ticket for the first southbound train I could find, a rattling green beast that promised distance. I found a seat by the window and stared at my reflection in the dark glass. A pale, determined face superimposed over a world rushing away. The train clattered through the night and into the next day, the rhythm of the wheels a chaotic soundtrack to the turmoil in my chest. I didn't sleep. My hand never left my belly, a protective shield over the tiny life that was now my sole reason for being. That was where all my hope and all my courage lived now. The small southern city I had chosen from a tattered atlas was called Willow Creek. It was over 1,000 kilometers from the military base, a world away from the rigid order and prying eyes of my old life. The landscape was a soft green embrace, all rolling hills and misty rivers, the air mild and heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming magnolias. It was remote, quiet, and most importantly, no one here knew the name Clara Vance. Using a significant portion of my savings, I rented a single-room cottage on the south side of the city. It had a tiny courtyard with a stubborn lemon tree and a roof that sloped at a comforting angle. The landlady, a kind-eyed, robust woman named Mrs. Pei, took one look at me, a young woman alone with a suitcase and a story she wasn't telling, and her face softened. She knocked 50 cents off the monthly rent without me even asking. You remind me of my daughter, was all she said, pressing the key into my hand. Her kindness was the first warm thing I'd felt in weeks. The cottage was musty and sparse, but it was mine. The first and most pressing order of business was survival. Money gives a person courage, and I was about to become a mother. I needed to be brave. My own mother had been the best seamstress in our town. I'd grown up at her knee, watching her clever hands transform bolts of fabric into works of art. The hum of her sewing machine was the soundtrack of my childhood. During my years in the military compound, trying to be the perfect officer's wife, I had honed that skill to a fine point. I'd spent countless hours perfecting invisible mends on Julian's uniforms, stitching his collars with a precision that bordered on prayer. He never noticed. The craft I had used to power my love for him would now become the foundation of my survival. I set up a modest sewing station by the largest window in the cottage. I had brought my machine, and with my few remaining dollars I bought thread, needles, and a small stock of simple fabric. At first no one came. The neighbors were wary. I was young, my northern accent marked me as an outsider, and a woman living alone was a subject of curiosity and suspicion. I didn't rush. I started by making clothes for myself. In those days, fashion was a sea of drab grays and blues, shapeless and utilitarian. I pulled out a precious length of real Dacron fabric I'd hidden in the lining of my suitcase, a remnant from a happier time. I designed a simple A-line dress, but I added a defined waist and delicate ruffles at the cuffs and neckline. With the leftover scraps, I fashioned a matching bow for my hair. The next day I wore the new dress to the local supply co-op to buy groceries. I felt the weight of stares as I walked down the dusty street. It was the cashier, a woman with a warm, open face, who finally spoke up. "Excuse me, miss," she said, her eyes wide with admiration. "That dress, it's just lovely. Wherever did you get it?" I gave her a soft, confident smile. "I made it myself. If you like it, I could make one for you too. It's handmade. The fee would be just 50 cents. Really? Her face lit up. You've got yourself a deal. That dress was my first victory. It was the key that unlocked the door to my new life. Thanks to the cashier's enthusiastic word of mouth, my little tailoring booth began to get attention. My designs were fresh and unique, my craftsmanship meticulous. Soon, women were coming to my cottage door. Neighborhood aunties, factory girls, even a lead performer from the local arts troupe. I worked from morning until night, my back aching, my eyes straining in the lamplight. But watching the metal tins slowly fill with coins and ration tickets filled me with a profound sense of security I had never known with Julian. Busy hands are a powerful medicine for a wounded heart. In the whirlwind of measuring, cutting, and stitching, I had little time to dwell on the past. The sharp ache of Julian's betrayal began to dull, scabbed over by the satisfying work of creation. Only in the deep stillness of the night, when the sewing machine was silent, would I find myself absently tracing the small crescent-shaped scar on my wrist. I'd cut myself with her sewing scissors as a child, a moment of carelessness that had left a permanent mark. Ever since, whenever I faced a major crossroads, my fingers would find that little ridge of skin, as if touching a talisman of my own resilience. It was a subtle reminder that I was Clara Vance and I could survive on my own. One afternoon I was completely absorbed in finishing a custom cheongsam for the county magistrate's wife, a crucial commission that could make my reputation, when a firm knock sounded at the gate. "Come in," I called out, not looking up from the delicate silk, my focus absolute. Footsteps entered and stopped behind me. But then there was only silence. A long heavy pause that felt wrong. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. Fully I turned, and my world froze. Standing in my doorway, dusty and travel-worn, was Lieutenant Markham, Julian's adjutant. My heart seized in my chest. The needle in my hand slipped, jabbing deep into my fingertip. A single bead of blood welled up. How had he found me? "Ma'am," he began, his voice hesitant, his expression a complicated mix of relief and anxiety. Comrade Vance." I gathered the shattered pieces of my composure, setting my sewing aside and rising to my feet. My face was a placid mask. "Lieutenant Markham, you've got the wrong person." Panic flashed across his features. He took a quick step forward. "No, ma'am. Clara, I didn't get it wrong. Captain Thorne, he's been losing his mind. You just up and left without a word, and you left that—" He stumbled, unable to say the words. "Divorce papers." A cold laugh echoed in the hollow of my heart. Losing his mind. No doubt he was just furious that I might cause a scandal and ruin his precious chances for advancement. "I told you," I repeated, my voice cold as steel. "You've got the wrong person. People in uniform aren't welcome here. You should go." His face flushed. He had never seen me like this. In the compound I had always been gentle, accommodating, the picture of placid virtue. "Please, ma'am," he pleaded, desperation creeping into his tone. "Come back with me. Captain Thorne, it's not what you think. He and Isabel—" "Enough," I snapped, cutting him off, my chest tightening. "Whatever is between him and Isabel Rossi is no longer my concern. We are divorced. I am not your ma'am. Don't call me that again." I couldn't bear to hear her name. I was afraid that the fragile fortress I had built around my heart would crumble into dust. Lieutenant Markham stood there, stunned into silence. I knew I was being harsh. He had always been kind to me, the one who delivered the rare treats Julian sent home. But I couldn't afford kindness now. I had to be hard. "Please leave," I said, my voice trembling with a fury I could no longer contain. "Or I'll call for help." He looked into my eyes and saw the unyielding resolve there. Realizing his words were useless, he fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Ma'am, this is from Captain Thorne. It's his stipend. You're all alone out here." I recoiled as if he'd brandished a snake. "Take it back. I am not so desperate that I need his money." Just then the gate swung open and Mrs. Pay bustled in, carrying a steaming bowl of egg custard. "Clara, I just made this. Eat it while it's hot. It's good for you and the little one in your belly." The moment the words left her mouth, the world stopped. Lieutenant Markham's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated shock. His gaze dropped to my stomach, which was just beginning to show a gentle curve. He stared as if he'd been struck by lightning. My own face drained of color. Instinctively, my hands flew to my belly, a protective cage around my secret now horrifically exposed. His lips trembled. You're pregnant? I clenched my jaw, neither confirming nor denying it. But my silence, my protective stance, was all the confirmation he needed. His expression morphed from shock to dawning horror. Then, in a sudden, shocking movement, he slapped himself hard across the face. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't deserve forgiveness." He began to stammer, panic making him incoherent. "I have to go back. I have to tell the captain." "Oh, I can't tell him. There's an order." "But damn it, what do I do?" He muttered frantically about orders and not being allowed to speak, pacing in frantic circles in my small courtyard. The words "order" and "not allowed to say" snagged in my mind, a tiny hook of doubt. But it was instantly drowned by a rising tide of bitter resentment. What possible order could be more important than his wife and unborn child? What a convenient, pathetic excuse. "Go," I said, my voice flat and weary. I leaned against the doorframe, all the fight suddenly gone out of me. "Tell Julian Thorne that this child is mine. It has nothing to do with him. He can go and live his happy life with Isabel. Just leave me alone." Without another look at his devastated face, I turned, walked back into my cottage and slammed the door shut. I heard him stand outside for a long time, before a heavy, weary sigh was followed by the sound of his retreating footsteps. I slid slowly down the back of the door until I was sitting on the floor, the tears I had held back for so long finally breaking free in a silent, shuddering storm. Julian Thorne, I thought, the name a curse and a wound in the quiet of my new home. What did you ever take me for? Lieutenant Markham's visit was a stone thrown into the calm pond of my new life, and the ripples threatened to swamp my small, carefully built boat. For days I jumped at every sound, my heart hammering against my ribs at the sight of any uniform in the distance. I was terrified that Julian himself would appear at my gate, a storm of military authority and cold fury. More than that, I was gripped by a primal, chilling fear that he would try to take my baby from me. The law, I knew, was not always kind to mothers like me. That fear became a ghost that haunted my little cottage, making it hard to sleep, hard to eat. But as the days turned into a week and then two with no sign of him, the sharp edge of my panic began to dull. Life, stubborn and persistent, demanded to be lived. I ran a hand over my growing belly, feeling the subtle, fluttering movements that were becoming stronger each day. I had to be a fortress. For this child, I had to be unshakable. I made a decision. I could no longer be satisfied with small custom orders from neighbors. It was time to think bigger, to build a foundation so solid that no one could ever threaten our security again. I set my sights on the county's state-run department store. If I could get my designs onto their shelves, it would mean a steady income, legitimacy, and a future I could control. It was a wild, almost laughable ambition. For a private tailor, a single woman with no connections, to get her products into a state-run store was like trying to grab the moon from the sky. But I, Clara Vance, refused to accept that. I spent nearly half of my remaining savings to purchase the finest fabric I could find, a soft, durable cotton in a beautiful sky blue hue. Then I poured all my skill and hope into designing and hand-sewing 3 matching outfits: a modernized cheongsam for a mother, a pinafore dress for a little girl, and a pair of tiny overalls for a little boy. The designs were coordinated, a family look, something thoughtful and completely unheard of in our world of drab uniformity. With the 3 outfits carefully folded in a cloth bundle, I marched into the department store and straight towards the manager's office. I didn't even make it to the door. A young staff member with thick glasses blocked my path, looking me up and down with open contempt. "A private tailor wants to meet with our manager?" he sneered, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Everything we sell comes from official national manufacturers. We don't have space for small workshop junk like yours. Don't waste our time." I had anticipated this. Without flinching, I calmly unfolded my bundle and laid the 3 outfits on a nearby counter. "Comrade," I said, my voice steady, "whether something is good enough should be up to the customers, don't you think? This is a family series for parents and children to wear together. Look at the design. Look at the craftsmanship. Can your state factories make anything like this?" His eyes flickered with surprise. He was impressed, I could see it, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it. "It's flashy," he sniffed. "Doesn't fit with the spirit of simplicity we uphold." Our manager would never. Who says I wouldn't? A calm, deep voice interrupted from the open office door. A moment later, a kind-looking middle-aged man with a thoughtful expression stepped out. And behind him, to my astonishment, was the county magistrate's wife, the very woman for whom I had made the Chong Sam. The man was Mr. Zhang, the store manager. The magistrate's wife's face lit up when she saw me. "Oh my, it's Clara. Mr. Zhang, you must see the dress she made for me. Isn't it exquisite? Even my husband said I looked 10 years younger." Mr. Zhang's gaze shifted to the family outfits. His eyes, sharp and businesslike, grew brighter the longer he looked. He picked up the little pair of overalls, turning them over in his hands, examining the seams and the delicate embroidery on the tiny pocket. "Comrade Vance," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "This family line, it's a very clever idea. Here's what we'll do. Bring in 10 sets first. We'll put them on the shelves and test the market. If they sell well, we can discuss a long-term partnership." I felt a jolt of pure, undiluted joy. It was my breakthrough. I had smashed open the doors of a state-run business with nothing but my own 2 hands and my skill. My life was finally, truly heading in the direction I had fought for. To celebrate, I allowed myself a rare indulgence and went to the state-run restaurant, ordering a bowl of braised pork belly. The meat was rich and tender, the sauce sweet and savory. It was a reward, a testament to my own hard work. As I walked home, my heart felt lighter than it had in months. But as I passed the county post office, my steps faltered. I remembered the frantic, conflicted look on Lieutenant Markham's face, the way he'd muttered about orders. An absurd, treacherous thought wriggled into my mind. What if Julian really did have his reasons? I immediately shook my head, a bitter taste in my mouth. Clara, you never learn," I scolded myself. "He gave up his home for another woman and you're still making excuses for him?" I quickened my pace, driving the foolish hope from my mind. The partnership with the department store was a triumph. My family outfits sold out in a single day. Mr. Zhang immediately confirmed a long-term contract. My little workshop officially leveled up, becoming the Starlight Tailoring Studio. I hired 2 nimble-fingered women from the neighborhood to help with the flood of orders. My belly continued to grow, and the morning sickness was a daily trial, but whenever I looked around my bustling little studio, I felt a surge of powerful motivation. I thought life would continue on this steady, upward path. I was wrong. One afternoon, as I was cutting fabric in my courtyard, an unexpected, unwelcome figure appeared at my gate. It was Isabel Rossi. But she was not the proud, elegant peacock I remembered. Her crisp military garb was gone, replaced by a plain, ill-fitting work uniform. Her face was pale and waxy, her eyes burning with a frantic, jealous panic. Her gaze landed on my swollen stomach, and for a moment she looked utterly stunned. Then the jealousy deepened, twisting her beautiful features into something ugly. Well, look at you, Clara," she sneered, her voice like broken glass. "You really managed to hide yourself well." Instinctively, I stepped back, my hand flying to my belly. "What do you want?" My voice was cold, weary of her drama. She let out a harsh, brittle laugh. "What do I want? I'm here to tell you, don't get too full of yourself. Julian is mine. No one can take him from me. He's gone to Beijing for advanced training, and when he comes back, he'll marry me in grand fashion." I frowned. Something was deeply wrong. Her words were disjointed, her eyes wild. If Julian was in Beijing with a promising future, why did she look so desperate, so utterly unraveled? "You think I don't know your little scheme?" she spat, her eyes sharp as poisoned blades. "You're trying to use that baby to tie him down. Let me tell you, it won't work. He hates being manipulated." With a sudden guttural cry, she lunged at me like a madwoman, her hands, clawed and bony, aiming straight for my stomach. "You filthy whore. I'll send you and your bastard to hell." Terror froze the blood in my veins. I stumbled backward, but I was heavy, off balance. How could I possibly fend her off? Her hand was inches from me. In complete despair, I shut my eyes, bracing for the impact. At the very last second, a solid, powerful figure rushed from the side and shoved Isabel away with all her might. It was Mrs. Pei. "You crazy woman!" Mrs. Pei roared, stepping in front of me like a protective lioness. She was tall and strong, and she pointed a furious finger at Isabel's face. "How dare you touch my Clara? Attacking a pregnant woman in broad daylight? Do you even care about the law? I'm calling the police right now. Isabel had fallen hard to the ground, her hair disheveled, her uniform covered in dust. The moment she heard the word, police, raw terror flashed in her eyes. She scrambled to her feet, threw one last hate-filled glare at me, and then took off, stumbling and scrambling down the street like a beaten dog. I was trembling violently, gasping for air as I leaned against Mrs. Pay's sturdy shoulder. "Clara, are you all right? Who was that lunatic?" she asked, her voice full of concern as she helped me sit and poured me a cup of water. I shook my head, but inside, a storm of unease was crashing. Isabel's behavior wasn't that of a victorious lover. It was the behavior of someone cornered, desperate, and utterly unhinged. And how had she found me? A terrifying thought began to take shape in my mind. This wasn't just a messy love triangle. There was something else, something hidden and rotten beneath the surface. That very night, the fear returned tenfold. I asked Mrs. Pay's son, a strong young man who worked for the county's transportation team, to help me raise the height of my courtyard wall and install a heavier, sturdier lock on the gate. Only after it was done did I feel a sliver of safety return. But perhaps it was the shock of the attack, because that night, my belly began to tighten and ache in slow, persistent waves. I tried to convince myself it was just false labor, but the pain grew sharper, more frequent. A cold dread washed over me. I was going into labor. A whole month early. The pain was no longer a series of waves. It was a riptide, pulling me under, drowning my breath and my thoughts. I tried to get up, to knock on the wall that connected my room to Mrs. Pay's, but the moment I moved, a warm gush of fluid soaked my legs. My water had broken. Agony, sharp and blinding, surged through me, stealing the strength from my limbs. I collapsed back onto the bed, unable to even call out. The room swam, the lamplight flickering at the edges of my vision. I was terrified, more alone than I had ever been. My baby, I thought, a desperate prayer. Please be okay. Just as my consciousness started to blur, the door to my cottage burst open with a loud bang. It was Mrs. Pay, and right behind her was an elderly man I'd never seen, carrying a worn leather medicine box. "Clara." Mrs. Pay's face turned ashen when she saw me. I had a feeling. I brought Dr. Lin. Dr. Lin, as Mrs. Pay called him, was a retired county doctor with decades of experience. He hurried to my side, his movements calm and efficient. He checked my pulse, his brow furrowing deeply. "This is bad," he said, his voice low and serious. "The baby's not in the right position and it's too early. We need to act fast." The next few hours were a hell I could never have imagined. The pain tore through me again and again, a visceral, grinding thing that made me believe I wouldn't survive. Every contraction felt like the end of the world. "Clara, hang in there," Mrs. Pay whispered, holding my hand tightly, her grip a lifeline. "Think about the baby." Dr. Lin remained a pillar of calm. He guided my breathing, checked my progress, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. "Breathe, child. You are strong. Your body knows what to do." Sweat drenched my hair and clothes. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood, but I refused to cry out. This was my child. My fight. Mine alone. I had to win. I had to be strong enough for both of us. I don't know how long it lasted. It felt like an eternity trapped in a single moment of pain. Just when I was certain I had no strength left, Dr. Lin called out, "I see the head. One more push, Claire. Just a little more." I don't know where the strength came from, but I somehow summoned a final, primal reserve from the depths of my soul and pushed with everything I had left. Then a sound pierced through the darkness. A sharp, piercing, beautiful cry. My entire body went limp, relief washing over me like a cool balm. I felt like I had been pulled from deep water, gasping and spent. "It's out. A big, healthy boy." Mrs. Pay shouted, her voice thick with tears of joy. But before I could even catch my breath, Dr. Lin called out again, his voice urgent. "There's another one. Hurry. It's twins." My mind went completely, utterly blank. Twins? The shock of it filled me with a fresh, impossible wave of strength. After another round of blinding, exhausting pain, a second, slightly softer cry filled the room. My daughter had arrived. "A boy and a girl," Mrs. Pay said, her voice filled with awe. "A perfect balance. Dragons and phoenixes in harmony." She brought the two tiny wrinkled newborns to me. One, my son, had a shock of dark hair and features that were already unmistakably a miniature of Julian. The other, my daughter, had a softer face, a tiny rosebud mouth, and a dimple in her cheek that was all mine. The moment I saw them, the floodgates broke. Tears I didn't know I had left streamed down my cheeks, hot and cleansing. These two little lives, these perfect fighting souls, were the most precious gifts I had ever earned. They were the reward for all the hardship, the heartbreak, the pain. I named my son Leo. Leo Vance. And my daughter, I named her Grace. Grace Vance. I gave them names filled with strength and peace because that was my only wish for them. A life of their own making, a peaceful, stable beginning free from the shadows of the past. I held my babies close, feeling their warm, tiny breaths against my skin. My heart swelled until I thought it would burst, brimming with a deep, unshakable sense of fulfillment and resolve. Julian Thorne, I thought without bitterness for the first time. You see this? Even without you, the three of us are a family. We are whole. The news of the twin births spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. Neighbors came in a constant stream, bringing small gifts and offerings of congratulations. Mrs. Pei cared for me as if I were her own daughter, cooking restorative chicken soup and sweet red sugar eggs for me 3 times a day. And with the joyful buzz surrounding the birth of the twins, my Starlight tailoring studio thrived even more. Manager Zhang gave me the most prominent counter spot in the children's section of the department store to launch a dedicated Starlight Kids line. My life genuinely felt like it had turned a corner. It was sunshine after a long, brutal storm. I was busy, blissfully so, caring for the babies, managing the studio, building a future. I was so consumed by this new vibrant life that I had almost truly forgotten Julian Thorne ever existed. Until the day Leo and Grace turned 1 month old. That afternoon I heard a familiar set of footsteps at my gate. But it wasn't the hurried, anxious step of Lieutenant Markham. It was a slower, heavier tread, one I would have recognized in my sleep. I looked up from where I was rocking Grace in my arms and my blood ran cold. He stood at my door. Julian Thorne himself. He was in his uniform, but it was dusty and worn. He was noticeably thinner, his face haggard, covered in a scruffy beard. His eyes, dark, sunken and bloodshot, were locked on me and the baby in my arms. It had only been a few months, but seeing him again felt like a lifetime had passed. Yet my heart, to my own surprise, was calm. I held my daughter and stared at him as if he were a stranger who had wandered into the wrong yard. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice flat, using the same tone I had used on his adjutant. His lips moved. His Adam's apple bobbed as he struggled to form words. His voice, when it finally came, was horribly hoarse. "Clara." That was all he managed before his voice failed him again. His bloodshot eyes roamed greedily over my face, my arms, the baby in my arms, and then moved past me to the cradle inside where Leo was sleeping. There was a world of pain in his expression, a deep, gut-wrenching regret, and something else I couldn't name, a raw, desperate hunger. He stood there, a statue of regret and weariness on my doorstep. The man I had once loved, the man whose memory I had fought so hard to erase, was now a ghost from a past life I had outgrown. "Captain Thorne," I said deliberately, putting a wall of formality between us. "If you're here to offer congratulations, I appreciate it. But if you've come for the children, you can forget it. Their last name is Vance. They have nothing to do with you." My words hit him like a physical blow. His tall frame swayed slightly and his face turned a shade paler. "Clara, please," he rasped, his voice breaking. "Let me explain. It's not what you think." He paused, gathering the tattered remains of his composure. "Isabel Rossi. She was a deep-cover spy. Her target was me. The layout of the base, our strategic maps. I was under orders from my superiors to play along, to draw out the bigger network behind her. That's why I distanced myself from you. None of it was real. It was all part of the plan." His voice was low, each word measured and heavy, as if he had rehearsed them 1,000 times on the long journey here. I stood frozen, my arms tightening instinctively around Grace. A spy? A fake relationship? A mission? It sounded like a plot from a cheap thriller, something far too convoluted to be real. "I couldn't tell you the truth," he continued, pain flooding his sunken eyes. "It was for your protection. The less you knew, the safer you were. Even my supposed transfer to Beijing was part of the operation. A misdirection to lull them into a false sense of security." He swallowed hard, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I didn't know she would go that far, that she would come to our home, to you. I'm sorry, Clara. It was all my fault. I thought pushing you away would protect you. I didn't realize I was hurting you more than anyone else ever could. As he spoke, he pulled a wrinkled, well-handled envelope from inside his uniform jacket. I recognized it instantly. It was the letter I had left behind. The moment I got home and found this and the divorce papers, I wanted to come for you right away, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I couldn't. The mission had reached its most critical stage. I wasn't allowed to leave, not for anything. His hands curled into fists at his sides, the veins standing out. I could only send Markham to find you. I told him not to alarm you, just to make sure you were safe. His eyes lifted to mine, shimmering with unshed tears. When he reported back that you were carrying our child. His voice trembled and broke again. I wanted nothing more than to fly straight to you. We finally made the arrest 3 days ago. We caught Isabel and the entire network behind her. The moment it was over, the moment I was free, I came straight here. He took a tentative step forward, his hand reaching out in a silent, desperate plea. Come home with me, please. I held my daughter, my anchor in the storm of his words, and listened in silence. My mind was a whirlwind. Logically, it made a twisted kind of sense. It explained Isabel's erratic, desperate behavior. It explained Markham's hesitation and his muttering about orders. But emotionally, it was a tidal wave I couldn't withstand. Why did his noble mission have to be paid for with my suffering, my humiliation, my shattered heart? I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh in the quiet courtyard, and took a step back, holding Grace closer. Nice story, Julian. Really. You should write novels. I looked him dead in the eye, letting all the ice I had cultivated over these long months fill my gaze. Too bad. I don't believe a word of it. My rejection struck him like a bucket of ice water. Whatever fragile hope had been flickering in his eyes was instantly extinguished. He stood motionless, his tall frame seeming to shrink, becoming cold and desolate, utterly helpless. This man who commanded troops on a battlefield now looked like a lost child who had done something terribly wrong. Clara, I'm telling the truth, he said, his voice horribly hoarse. If you want, I'll bring my commanding officer here to explain. I'll show you the official citation for the mission. No need, I interrupted, my voice as cold as the winter ground. Captain Thorne, even if everything you said is true, so what? You sacrificed me. You sacrificed our marriage for your bigger picture. And now, just because your mission is over, you think you can walk back in here and pretend none of it ever happened? You think I'll just pack my bags and our children and follow you home like a good little wife? I looked him straight in the eyes, every word a sharp, clear dagger. The moment you chose your mission over your wife, it was over between us. Felt good finally saying it out loud. All the pain, the fear, the indignation I had bottled up for months finally had a target. It poured out of me, a flood of long-suppressed truth. Julian's face grew paler with every word. His lips parted, but no sound emerged. He knew I was right. He had protected the country in his way, but in doing so he had broken the one person he should have protected most. Then his gaze shifted from my face to the baby girl in my arms, and then over to the cradle inside where Leo slept soundly. The raw ache in his eyes, the naked yearning, the helpless primal love of a father was impossible to miss. They're my children, he whispered, the words barely audible. I want to see them. Surprisingly, I found myself nodding. I wasn't heartless. You can, I said. I would never be petty enough to deny the truth of their blood. No matter my anger, I couldn't erase that. I turned slightly, allowing him entry into my home, the home I had built without him. He stepped quietly over to the cradle, his movements hesitant, as if afraid his very presence might break something. He crouched down, leaning in, his fingers trembling as he reached out to brush his son's cheek. But he stopped, his hand hovering in midair, afraid to wake him. Slowly he withdrew his hand, his eyes glistening. This man who could face enemy fire without blinking, now knelt by a wooden cradle, blinking back tears. He stared at Leo for a long, long time, drinking in the sight of his son. Finally he stood up and looked at me again, his voice low and pleading, humbled in a way I had never heard before. Clara, I'm not asking you to forgive me now. But, can I stay? I won't bother you. I won't live in your house. I'll just rent the place next door. I just want to see the kids every day. I need to make it up to you both. I didn't answer right away. My heart was a tangled, messy knot. Seeing him like this, so broken and vulnerable, I'd be lying if I said I felt nothing. A part of me, the part that had loved him so deeply, ached for his pain. But then I remembered the coldness in his smile when he stood with Isabel in our home. I remembered the shame of walking through the compound with my head down, my heart in pieces. I remembered the terror of being alone and pregnant in a strange city. My heart hardened again. Forgive him? Why should it be that easy? His current misery felt like the bare minimum he owed me, a delayed consequence for the agony he had inflicted. I needed him to feel it, to truly understand the cost of his duty. Suit yourself, I said flatly, my tone giving away nothing. Then I turned around, holding Grace close, and walked into the inner room without a backward glance. I knew this war of hearts was far from over. But for the first time I held all the cards. And so Julian Thorne, the decorated captain, rented the empty, dusty house next to mine and moved in. The transformation was something to behold. The commanding officer who used to bark orders with unquestionable authority became a quiet, almost spectral presence. He didn't know how to cook, so he got up before dawn every morning to stand in the long line at the state-run cafeteria, buying the freshest pork buns and the hottest soy milk, which he would then leave quietly on my doorstep before retreating to his own house. When weeds began to sprout on my courtyard wall, I came out the next morning to find him already there on a ladder, meticulously cleaning it off inch by inch, his uniform shirt damp with sweat. At night, when I had to get up multiple times to nurse the twins, I noticed he left a light on in his room, a silent, constant vigil. He once said through the gate that if anything happened I just had to call out and he'd hear me. He was like a silent shadow, always nearby, always watching, yet always cautious not to cross some invisible line I had drawn. He respected the boundary of my gate as if it were a national border. I accepted it all. The food, the repairs, the silent vigilance, but my face remained an unreadable mask. The other military wives had a saying, spoil a man and he becomes a bastard. I was determined to see just how much patience this particular bastard really had. Meanwhile, my business continued to boom. The Starlight Kids line was a sensation, and orders were flooding in faster than my 2 helpers and I could manage. The stress was immense, especially with 2 infants needing constant care. One afternoon, I was rushing to finish a critical batch of samples for a potential export order when Grace suddenly became fussy. I picked her up and my heart plummeted. Her forehead was burning up, her little face flushed an alarming red. A high fever out of nowhere. Panic seized me. I grabbed her, my mind racing, and bolted for the door, ready to run to the county hospital. I flung it open and ran straight into a solid wall of muscle. It was Julian. The moment he saw Grace, wailing and feverish in my arms, he didn't ask a single question. He simply reached out and took her from me, his movements firm and sure. I'll take you, he said in that tone I remembered so well, the one that brooked no argument, the voice of an officer in a crisis. For once I didn't resist. He held Grace securely against his chest with one arm and strode ahead with long, purposeful steps. I hurried behind him, my eyes fixed on his broad back. There was something about it, so steady and strong, that cut through my panic and somehow calmed my racing heart. At the hospital he was a whirlwind of efficiency. He handled everything. Registration, finding the doctor, translating the medical jargon, paying the fees. Moving through the chaotic system with an authority that made people jump. When a stern nurse had to give Grace an injection and she cried her little lungs out, this iron-blooded soldier did the most astonishing thing. He awkwardly cradled her, rocking her in his arms, and began to hum a broken, tuneless version of an old army marching song under his breath. The look in his eyes was pure, unadulterated heartache, even deeper than my own. In that moment something shifted inside me. The hard shell around my heart developed a hairline crack. We were there until almost midnight. Finally, her fever broke. She lay sleeping peacefully on the hospital cot, exhausted, one tiny hand still tightly gripping Julian's calloused finger. Her breathing was soft and steady, completely at peace. Julian sat right by her side, watching her without blinking, as if he could memorize every tiny lash on her cheek. I sat in the chair next to him, staring at his profile, at the exhaustion and worry etched into his face, at the bloodshot eyes that hadn't known proper sleep in days, maybe weeks. My heart was a chaotic swirl of emotions. Maybe he really was a good soldier. Maybe he was even trying to be a good father. He just hadn't known how to be a good husband. Clara, he finally spoke, his voice low and hoarse from the long night. I'm sorry. I let you and the kids suffer. I sat in silence for a while, the hum of the hospital the only sound. She's your daughter too, I said calmly. You're only doing what you should. He let out a bitter, quiet laugh and said nothing more. The room fell into a long, heavy silence, punctuated only by the twins' soft breathing and the distant noises of the night. Just when I thought he wouldn't speak again, Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in a clean white handkerchief. He held it out to me. I had this approved for you, he said, his voice steady but filled with a profound gravity. For you and the children. Puzzled, I took the bundle and carefully unfolded the cloth. Inside, gleaming under the harsh hospital lights, was a military medal. Next to it was an official certificate stamped with a red seal. The medal was for second-class merit. My eyes scanned the certificate, the words blurring before coming into sharp, shocking focus. Awarded to Comrade Clara Vance by the National Military Command in recognition of her outstanding contribution and personal sacrifice during Operation Fox Hunt. My hands began to tremble uncontrollably. The heavy metal burned in my palm, a brand of a truth I had never wanted. Operation Fox Hunt. I repeated the words, my voice a whisper. That was the mission's code name, Julian said, his voice low and relieved as if a great weight was finally being shared. Isabel Rossi was a key agent planted by the enemy. Her code name was Red Fox. Her assignment was to get close to me and extract classified intelligence. Our commanders decided on a counterintelligence strategy, to let her think it was working. They needed me to play along convincingly. He paused, his voice tightening. To make it real, they said we had to sacrifice my family. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a painful, respectful emotion. Clara, this medal, half of it belongs to the country. But the other half belongs to you. You earned it with every tear, every moment of suffering you endured alone. I looked at him, the man I had loved, hated, and tried so hard to forget. And in that moment, in the sterile quiet of the hospital room, I realized something painful and profound. Even without knowing it, we had fought that war together. All the pain I endured wasn't because he didn't love me, but because he loved his country in a way that demanded a terrible price. And as his wife, I had been the one to pay it. I didn't know how to feel. Should I be proud of this twisted, backhanded recognition? Or should I mourn all over again what it had stolen from me? Then Julian stood up suddenly. He straightened his shoulders and with a solemn, perfect precision, he raised his hand to his brow in a formal, heartfelt salute. His eyes were locked on mine, full of a remorse so deep it was bottomless and a hope so fragile it hurt to look at. I, Julian Thorne, as a husband and a father, ask once more for your forgiveness. I failed to protect you. But if you'll allow it, I want to spend the rest of my life making it right. His voice broke. Please. Give me another chance. I looked at him, then down at our peacefully sleeping children, and at the shining, heavy metal in my hand. And in that moment, the mountain of ice I had built around my heart, the fortress I had thought was impregnable, finally began to melt. Tears streamed down my face, but for the first time in a long time, they were not tears of bitterness. They were tears of release. A shaky, almost disbelieving smile touched my lips. Julian Thorne, I said, my voice trembling. You want my forgiveness? His eyes widened, the hope in them blazing like a supernova. Fine. But there are conditions. Name them, he said, his voice raw with a hope so fierce it was almost painful to witness. 1 or 100. I'll agree to them all. I looked at him, this proud man brought to his knees not by an enemy, but by his own love and regret. I held all the power, and for the first time he knew it. I intended to use it to build something new, not to punish. First, I began, my voice gaining strength. You cook and you wash the dishes. No more state-run cafeteria buns. You learn. A flicker of surprise, then a swift nod. Done. Second, I continued, my gaze unwavering. You change diapers. You do the midnight feedings. They are your children too. You will know the weight of them in your arms at 2 a.m. No problem, he said without a moment's hesitation. And third, I paused, letting the silence stretch, watching the nervous tension tighten the line of his shoulders. From now on, the official owner of Starlight Tailoring Studio is me, Clara Vance. Not Mrs. Thorne. Me. And I control the household finances. He blinked, processing this. It wasn't a demand for material things. It was a demand for recognition. It was about my identity separate from his. Then, the most miraculous thing happened. The tension in his face melted away, and he broke into the first real genuine smile I had seen from him in what felt like a lifetime. It was a little wobbly, but it was real, and it transformed his weary face, brighter than the moonlight struggling through the hospital window. "Yes, ma'am," he said, the title now a term of endearment, of respect. A soft laugh escaped him, a sound I hadn't heard in years. Then, carefully as if approaching a skittish bird, he stepped forward. He didn't just reach for me. He wrapped his arms around all three of us, me, the sleeping Grace in my arms, and by extension, the little son he had yet to properly hold. It was an awkward, wonderful, all-encompassing embrace. I stiffened for a second, the old wounds protesting, but then I melted into it. My head found a space against his shoulder, and the scent of pine and frost was no longer cold but familiar. It was the scent of coming home. That embrace. I had waited far, far too long for it. The journey back to the military compound a year later was a different one. I didn't return as the timid, forgotten wife, but as Clara Vance, business owner and mother of twins, walking hand in hand with a profoundly changed Julian Thorne. Our return caused a stir that rippled through the base for weeks. The sight of the once stern, unapproachable Captain Thorne transformed into a runaround superdad was a source of endless fascination and, I suspected, quiet admiration. He could be seen with a baby nestled in the crook of one arm and a grocery basket in the other, his officer's cap sometimes perched precariously on Leo's head. And I was no longer just his wife. Thanks to Manager Zhang's support, my Starlight brand had expanded to the provincial capital. I became the first woman in the compound to truly own and operate her own successful business. I hired more staff, managed accounts, and designed new collections. The other wives no longer looked at me with pity, but with curiosity and a new kind of respect. Julian and I, against all odds, became the couple everyone talked about. They called us the model for a new generation of military family life. But the true test wasn't in public. It was in the quiet, daily grind of our new life together. Julian kept his word. He was a man of his word after all. The first time he attempted to cook dinner, he nearly set a pot of rice on fire, filling our small kitchen with the smell of scorched grain and his own muttered curses. I stood in the doorway, Grace on my hip, and couldn't help but laugh. The sound startled both of us. He looked up, his face smudged with soot, and a rueful grin spread across his features. "I said I'd cook," he said, defending himself with mock seriousness. "I didn't say I'd be any good at it." "We'll learn," I said, and it felt like a promise for more than just cooking. And we did. He learned to chop vegetables without amputating a finger. I learned to delegate more at the studio to be home for bedtime. He became a master of the midnight feeding, often taking both shifts so I could sleep, sitting in the rocking chair with a twin in each arm, telling them soft, nonsensical stories about the stars. He never once complained about the mess, the noise, the sheer exhausting chaos of twins. He reveled in it as if making up for lost time. One evening, I came home late from a meeting with a new fabric supplier. The house was quiet, bathed in the soft orange glow of the setting sun. I found Julian in the living room, asleep in the big armchair. Leo was asleep on his chest, one tiny fist clutching his shirt collar. Grace was asleep in the crook of his other arm, her head nestled in the hollow of his shoulder. All three were breathing in a deep, synchronized rhythm. The sight of it, this fierce soldier brought to utter peace by his children, struck a chord so deep within me that it felt like the final piece of my heart clicking back into place. This was the man he was meant to be. Not the cold officer or the distant husband, but this man. A father. My partner. He must have felt my gaze because his eyes fluttered open. He didn't startle, just looked at me, his eyes soft with sleep and something else, something warm and steady that had been missing for so long. "Hey," he whispered, careful not to disturb the babies. "Hey," I whispered back, my heart full. This was our new normal. It wasn't perfect. We still had moments of tension, when the ghost of Isabel and the memory of my lonely exile would surface. But now we faced them together. We talked about it. He listened, truly listened, to the depth of the pain he had caused without getting defensive. And I, in turn, began to truly understand the impossible weight of the choice he had been forced to make. The love we built in that small house on the base was different from our first, naive love. It was sturdier, woven with threads of forgiveness, shared sacrifice, and a profound gratitude for our second chance. It was a love that had been tested by fire and had, against all odds, been tempered into something unbreakable. One afternoon about 2 years after our return, I was working on the books for the studio in my home office when I heard peals of laughter from the backyard. I walked to the window and looked out. The scene that greeted me was one of such pure, unvarnished joy that it stole my breath away. The late afternoon sun cast long, golden shadows across the lawn. Julian, out of his uniform and in a simple cotton shirt, was attempting to teach 2-year-old Leo and Grace how to march in a straight line. It was a complete disaster. Leo, his little face a mirror of his father's determination, stomped his feet with great enthusiasm but in no particular direction, while Grace, giggling uncontrollably, simply spun in circles until she fell over in a dizzy heap onto the grass. Julian didn't get frustrated. He just laughed, a rich, full-bodied sound that was becoming more and more common in our home. He scooped Grace up, dusted her off, and then swung a protesting but laughing Leo onto his shoulders. He was telling them a story, his voice a low rumble I couldn't quite hear, but I could see the rapt attention on their faces. Then, as if he could feel my gaze, he turned his head and looked straight at the window. His eyes met mine, and the warmth in them was enough to melt the last remnants of any lingering winter in my soul. It was a look that said, "Look what we made. Look what we saved." I smiled back, a true, easy smile that reached my eyes. Later that night, after the twins were finally asleep, we sat together on the porch steps, sharing a pot of tea in the cool evening air. The compound was quiet, the sky a deep velvet blue scattered with a million stars. "I put in the paperwork today," he said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. I looked at him, a question in my eyes. "For a transfer to a training unit," he clarified. "It's a desk job. More predictable hours. No more extended field operations." I was stunned. His career, his command had always been his life. "Julian, you don't have to do that." "I know," he said, taking my hand. His grip was firm and sure. "I want to. I missed the first 2 years of their lives, Clara. I'm not missing any more." "And I missed," he paused, his thumb stroking my knuckles. "I missed you. I want to be here. For bedtime stories, for family dinners, for all of it. A training command is still a command. It's just one that lets me come home to my wife and children every single night." Tears pricked at my eyes, but they were happy tears. This wasn't a sacrifice he was making for me. It was a choice he was making for us. It was the final, undeniable proof that our family was his priority. "What about the studio?" he asked. "I heard from Manager Zhang's wife that you're looking at a retail space in the capital." I nodded, a thrill of excitement mixing with the deep contentment of the moment. "I am. It's a big risk, but the demand is there. The Starlight brand is stronger than I ever imagined." "Then we'll make it work," he said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "Wherever your business takes you will follow. That's what partners do." Partners. The word settled over me warm and right. We sat in silence for a long time after that, watching the stars, his arm around my shoulders, my head resting against him. The past with all its pain was still there, a part of our story, but it no longer defined us. It was a shadow that made the present light seem all the brighter. I thought of the long, lonely train ride to Willow Creek, of the terror of giving birth alone, of the fierce determination that had fueled me. I thought of the scar on my wrist and how I didn't need to touch it for strength anymore. The strength was inside me now, a part of my very bones, but it was also beside me, in the man who had learned to value his family above all else. Our story wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy and painful and real. But as I sat there with Julian, in the quiet of the night we had fought so hard to win, I knew with a certainty that resonated in my very soul that we had found our way to a happiness far deeper and more enduring than any I had ever dared to imagine. We had gone our separate ways only to find a new path together. The end.